This is the Performance People podcast with me, Georgie.
And me, Ben. This pod is all about people who know about performance.
We're going to speak to some of the biggest performers in sport, entertainment, business and politics about how they got there and how they stay there.
And we'll talk to those closest to them about all the stuff we didn't already know about them.
You can listen to Performance People in the usual places where you get your podcast or watch us on YouTube. And don't forget, you can always follow us on our Performance People channels.
For now, though, here's our latest episode.
Joining us on today's Performance People are one of the most decorated British Olympian rowers and her adventurer husband.
Helen Glover is a double Olympic champion, 3 times world champion, and the first mum to compete for GB rowing.
She's joined by her husband, the explorer Steve Backshall, who's faced off against king cobras and dived with great white sharks.
Together, they're pretty impressive performance people.
I would feel so much more comfortable working with a king cobra than I ever would strolling around a big city at night after closing time.
Under pressure is what I don't enjoy, but I thrive in.
Is there anything you won't do?
I wouldn't do Strictly again.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us on Performance People today. There's a whole load of stuff that we want to get through with you. But I just want to start in one place because I'm obsessed with sharks. So Steve, just on the subject of sharks, just what on earth possesses a person to dive outside of a cage with great whites, hammerheads, bull sharks, tiger sharks? I don't understand. Can you explain it to me?
Can I just jump in here, actually? Steve, before you answer this, you just got to help me out a little bit here, because Georgie is one of these people, doesn't matter where we are in the world, looks down into the water. There's sharks in there. I'm not going in.
We could be in a swimming pool and there's a shark in there, I'm telling you. I'm obsessed, fascinated, phobic, all of the above. But just tell me what possesses somebody to do what you do.
Well, I think just the same as the first time you sail is never going to be in the America's Cup. The first time you dive with a shark, it's never going to be a great white. I dived with my first shark when I was 12, and it was probably about 2.5 feet long and was a blacktip reef shark. And over the years, I started diving with lemons and Caribbean reef and grey reef. And you get to learn a lot about a shark's body language, about the situations and the environments where it can be safe to dive with sharks, and conversely, the things that you look for, which are negative things. So poor water quality, food in the water, dusk and dawn when they're likely to be more active. And over time, you get to learn their rhythms. It took me 20 years to work up to being able to dive out the cage with a great white. And there are still lots of situations where I would look at the environment and say, no way, not today. But if you get it right, then it can be as safe as diving alongside a sea lion or a dolphin.
You see, I just don't buy it. I don't believe you.
From the expert.
fills me with complete fear. This morning, in order to sort of work up to our chat with you guys, I put on the telly and I prized our daughter Bellatrix away from LOL, the movie, which is her current obsession that she has to watch 24/7. And I prized her away from that and said, you're going to actually watch this program because these are the people that we're chatting to today, Bellatrix, and they're fascinating and they do this and they do that. And she pulled her eyes up from her screen and was looking at the TV, and she said, well, Mummy, I just think he's just Mr. Risky Pants, isn't he? that was her take on Mr. Risky Pants. But I mean, but on the subject of risk, I mean, to me, it does seem like a huge risk to dive with sharks. But on the subject of risk, I mean, that your whole being must have changed massively in your approach to diving with sharks and coming face to face with king cobras and anacondas and whatever it might be through virtue of your shows, since you've had children, right? Because, I mean, we all become a little bit, different with our approach to risk when we've had kids. That must have changed for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, my whole life has always been one big, long risk assessment. And I have to say that working with animals, I would say that's the safest part of my job by a long way. And particularly with things like snakes, which are inherently predictable, cold-blooded animals that have very set patterns to the way they live their days, I would feel so much more comfortable working with a king cobra than I ever would strolling around a big city at night after closing time. And so, yes, I have changed the way that I deal with risk, without question since I've become a dad. And Hels and I have talked an awful lot about where we go from here. But more to me, the problem is how much time I spend away, because kids change so fast. We just dropped our little boy off for his first day of school this morning, and it seems like yesterday that he was learning to crawl. And if you go away for a 6-week or a 2-month expedition, you come back and they are totally different people, and they're not good at you being away for that length of time. So that's been the big thing for us, hasn't it? It's been figuring out what happens now. What is the future for what I do for a living?
Yeah, I mean that's something I can certainly relate to, being away with these different sailing projects, and it's tough, isn't it? As the kids are growing up and you feel like you're missing out. But how are you both changing the number of projects that you take on to try and fit that around and work the diaries around, so someone's always at home, or you're both at home together as much as possible?
Yeah, kind of. I think probably it's more the first question we ask whenever anything comes in is the first question we ask is, will it take me away from the kids? And then the second question we ask is, how does it physically work with childcare? Suddenly you realise your life is just way less spontaneous, especially for me. You can't just go yes to everything and I'll be there tomorrow, I'll get on that flight, and you realise that everything has to just be so much more practical than it ever was. And I'm not great at kind of planning and logistics.
That is the understatement of the century. Can I just say?
I thought you two, of all people, would have been amazing at planning and logistics, on the basis that your lives are one big muddle with planning and logistics, with 3 young children, expeditions, training routines, all that kind of stuff. I mean, how is that not really well organised?
Yeah, it's called winging it. We're basically a mess that just gets through each day, don't we?
Excuse me, speak for yourself. Helen is exceptional at any kind of planning that is to do with what she does, and her ability to. I cannot imagine there is anyone in the world who would be able to do what she does in terms of. Sometimes you get 2 hours sleep in a night because the kids have been kicking off, or someone's been sick, or whatever. And she'll still be up at 6 o'clock in the morning and be on the water and do that, hour and a half, 2 hour long session. That kind of drive is second to none. But when it comes to the minutiae of normal life, that's not her strong point. But it is mine, and I'm much better at organising stuff, right? And I think, we just kind of like battle together to kind of find a way. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, well, that's why you're such a good partnership, isn't it? I said to Ben last night, right, I'm going to go to bed early, and then tomorrow morning, could you please just deal with Fox first thing, because he'll need his milk, and he normally wakes up at about 6-ish, and could you just do with that? Because I'm just going to go and spend half an hour on the cross train. I've decided to get myself back in shape and do my fitness. So I said, I just want to go and do that. Of course, 7:10 comes this morning, and have I stepped into the area where the cross trainer is? No, I absolutely have not done that. So where does that sort of that willpower come? How do I be more like Helen? Where can I find that willpower to sort of make myself be a better person every day and start the day much better than I did this morning?
It's such a tricky question, and I think it's something that I've actually got better at since having kids, because I definitely deal best under pressure. Well, I remember even at school, I was someone who would leave it to the last minute for homework or for deadlines or for something like that. Under pressure is what I don't enjoy, but I thrive in. And so I definitely find if I have all the time in the world, I won't really use it. But if I have one slot in the day and I know if I don't train now, I won't get another chance because the kids will need me, then I will train. And I think almost forcing myself into the situation where if I know I lose that opportunity, it's gone, works best for me, because otherwise you're just relying on motivation, and that's something that's just quite fickle.
Something that I learned from Helen, a very practical thing that I'd never realised before, is what she does as an athlete is the very, very first thing in the morning, she'll do something that piques her testosterone particularly, right? So you're doing things that kind of get the hormones, adrenaline, etc., racing. So it might be very first thing in the morning doing something like getting into a punch bag or throwing a slam ball or doing anything that gets those hormones moving, and you might totally not feel like it. You might be, still in the midst of the last night's sleep fug, but within a couple of minutes, all of a sudden, your body's like, oh, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it makes a difference, not just to being able to train first thing in the morning, but to the whole of the rest of your day. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, that's more for racing or for intensity. You do that and you get your hormones peaked. But it's definitely true that I think setting expectations for me has always been a really important thing. If I start a training session thinking this is going to be 2 hours long, that's really intimidating. Whereas if I think 20 minutes is better than 0 minutes, I'll probably get to 20 minutes and carry on. I think keeping it really simple and manageable. And then you do get that feeling, that real feel good, that real buzz, that motivation of having achieved something, and then it makes you in a better mood for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Again, having kids, and suddenly you don't have all day to train like you used to when you're doing an Olympic campaign, right? Really, and trying to just do something is key, isn't it? Really, because it's so easy to put it off. Say, oh well, I can't do the full. I wanted to do a 2-hour bike ride or whatever it is. I can't do it, so I'm just my whole plan's written off. Just committing to doing something, I think that's key. And most people are in that,
it's
aren't
so
they?
true.
Really, that with their everyday lives, that they don't have the time. So just trying to get something done.
How are you not permanently distracted by that? How can you focus on what you need to do with that going on around you? I mean, I'm thinking in particular of lockdown, because we were in that sort of very strange period of time where that had to be the case. But I mean, how on earth, I mean, on an Instagram image, I can see that looks absolutely incredible. But in practical terms, what does that feel like?
I think the most important thing I had to do was tell myself 2 things. One, this will not be the same as normal training. I'm not in a centre of excellence where, you don't have babies crawling on you and you have scientists standing behind you. And 2, the reason I'm doing this, one of the big things I'm achieving is not just the physical training, but it's what you're showing your kids. And if you're showing your kids by being inclusive and picking them up and not telling them to go away, but actually including them, then actually my role as a role model is being achieved. I feel like it definitely kind of shifted my focus when I was training. I used to be the most kind of absolute blinkers on focus, nothing could get into my zone. And now I kind of welcome that, because it reminds me that there's more to sport, there are bigger things in life, but it's still a really great part of life that I'm lucky to do.
So, I mean, a classic example would be last night, after we got the kids down, we had our sort of like decompress, put the television on. But while that was happening, Helen was in front of the television doing her yoga stretches, and I was sat on the sofa doing my freediving breathing exercises. So we actually spent a good 45 minutes we were watching the telly, but doing something positive at the same time. And that probably sounds like absolutely...
We do have evenings where we just
my
watch
version
TV
of that
as well.
is I can watch. My version of that, guys, is that I can watch the telly and shop online at the same time. That's my version of multitasking.
I was doing the yoga.
Need to improve.
Look, there's some serious multitasking going on. It just depends what your priorities are. It's okay.
You're making me feel terrible. You really are. Steve, just talk to us about that period where Helen decided that she was going to go once again for the Olympics in Tokyo, because I mean, this to me is just astounding as a mum and everything else. And I know it must get boring sometimes, Helen, to have to constantly refer to this sort of pre and post period of Olympic career that you've had before children and after children. But to me, as a mum, it's fascinating to think that you would sort of say, okay, well, I've achieved great things. I've got 2 Olympic goals. Well, I actually can list it. 2 Olympic goals, triple world champion, quintuple World Cup champion, quadruple European champion, British champion in both women's fours and quadruple sculls. You have got so many accolades. It's not like you need another. But what makes you think halfway through lockdown, actually, I want to do this again?
I mean, for me, I think it was the strangest thing was the fact that after Rio, I had really said goodbye to the sport, and I had spent 4 years not as an athlete. And
you hadn't rowed, had you?
I hadn't rowed, and there's this really unique. I'm sure, Ben, you might have kind of recognised this. You get this sense of, on the new year of the Olympic year, as that new year chimes in, you tell yourself, this is Olympic year. And in 2020, the bells chimed, and it was the first time in 8 years I hadn't said, this is my Olympic year. And I genuinely sat there thinking, oh, like, I can't wait to watch my friends and teammates racing. And I was sat there 9 months pregnant, about to have the twins. And then in 2020, had the twins. And then a few weeks later was in lockdown. And I was a world away from being that Olympic athlete that I was, ready to watch on the sofa that summer. And then when they made the announcement about the games being moved for a year, and I had just had Kit and Bo, and I looked at Bo, my little girl, and I just thought, I could physically show you something different. No woman in the British rowing team has ever gone back and done this, and it started to feel like the only way anyone was ever going to do it was going to be off on their own terms. The setup wasn't there for women to achieve that and get back on the team. Everyone's in their living rooms training right now on a level playing field. It was probably a bit of that thing where we were all in lockdown. Everyone was kind of doing weird things, and I look back now and I think that was a really weird thing to do, to decide to go to another Olympics with a year's training. But it was something in seeing my kids, seeing the opportunity, and just going, I just got to give it a go.
But Helen, just to explain to people a little bit about how tough rowing is. I mean, I know a little bit about it through, people meeting different rowers through Olympic experiences, but I think it's the toughest sport out there in terms of the training that you have to put in. I mean, just tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the physical race is hard and it hurts. It's about a 7-minute race and it's pure pain. But like you say, it's mainly the background of the training that goes behind it. You're training 3 times a day, 6-7 days a week. We'd often get a Sunday off every 3 weeks. And it's just the monotony. You don't miss sessions, you don't miss days. And it's maybe a couple of hours in the water, a couple of hours in the gym, and then an hour on the rowing machine every day, getting the recovery with that.
She throws that away. But anyone who's ever been on a rowing machine, I've done a bit of that since we've got together, and I might get on for 7 minutes, 10 minutes, and come out at the end and be brutalised. And Helen will go faster than me and be on there for an hour and a half. And that is one of her 3 sessions in the day. The other session, she might do a marathon distance on the water and then get off and do an Olympic weights session that puts the power lifters to shame.
Well, not the power lifters to shame.
I mean,
take the praise, Helen. Take it.
It's insane. It's insane.
Honestly,
you're right. It's the toughest thing you can do.
It is insane. And everybody from the other sports that sees them, the cyclists train alongside them and go, "What are you doing?" And they do that day in, day out. They don't take any time off. It's brutal.
But that's why it was an opportunity
you watch
to do
all of
it
that
from home.
Yeah,
I watched all of that, and even just seeing her do one single 2K test on the ergo, it hurts me because you can see the amount of pain that she's putting herself through, and that is just one of 3 sessions in a day. It's crazy. I thought that I was a sporty person. I thought I was a competitive person until I met Helen, and I realised that I was not in her world.
But Steve, so you're watching all this unfold, obviously, and I think you've described it before as you sort of thought, oh God, because you saw something change in her eyes when it was announced that the games was going to be delayed by a year. What was that feeling like? Was it almost instantaneous? You knew that she was just going to do this thing. It was just the perfect sort of red flag.
Yeah. I mean, Helen literally had not been in a rowboat. She had not sat on the rowing machine for 4 years. And so the first time she did in lockdown, I thought, oh, here we go. And at the same time as kind of thinking, this is absolutely massive. Like Helen says, we were all seeking to try and find meaning out of that period of time when everything was in upheaval. And the very first adjective you used was fascinating. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating to see what she could do and achieve on her own, without a coach, without a nutritionist, without anyone even writing a program for her in the front room. It was fascinating to see an athlete re-emerge from someone who'd just given birth to twins, and to see that happen so quickly. 6 weeks, she was already back in incredible shape. 6 months, she beat her PB on the rowing machine without having had any input from anybody else. And I was as proud seeing that as I was watching her win gold in Rio, because to have done that completely off her own back with her own determination was something really, really special.
It's incredible. But Helen, what actually drove you to it? I mean, I know you said no one had done it, having kids and then come back, but is that what really drove you, or was it the fact that people thought there was a perception that you couldn't do that, or
Yeah, that's a
you
good
just
point.
missed out?
Yeah.
You missed the games and you wanted to be back in the games?
I think a little bit of everything. And then I think the more you get the sense that people think you can't and people think it's crazy and impossible, the more you think, well, I'll show you then.
Yeah.
And then I think a big shift was when I made the announcement, and it was about I'd been training for 6 months. It was 6 months to the games. And the big shift was the response. I made the announcement, and then I just did that thing of not turning on any social media, not looking at anything, not reading any messages. And a couple of days later, did. And it was so positive. And it was parents, it was mums, dads, carers, grandparents, all people who were like, you know, we're behind you, you're doing this for us, we're so proud that, you know, and it was just, I've never had those people support me before. It was always sports fans and rowing fans who were really interested. And it was this demographic of people who felt really represented. And that really changed my motivation, because I was like, this is really exciting, and it's so nice to represent something that's just a little bit different.
Absolutely. You're doing it for so many more people all of a sudden, not just the hardcore rowing fans and Olympic fans, but every parent out there. It's inspirational.
What about your kids? I mean, what do you think their perception of it will be in years to come? You know, what's the great takeaway for them, do you think?
I mean, right now they couldn't care less, and they have no idea. And I really hope that I think it's something that will grow with time. And I'm sure when they're older, we'll look back, and I think it'll be nice, because they'll always be able to say, you know, my mum was an Olympic champion, but for them to have been along for the ride for one of the Olympic Games is something I think really nice. That actually it wasn't just a pre-them life and then they were born. There's a kind of continuation of sport through their lives. And I hope it'll make them feel more part of my sporting career.
Talk to us a little bit about just how important you think it is for children and their mental health as much as anything, having come through lockdown, to get them outdoors and to enjoy the outdoors.
I think for their mental, physical health, it's really important. We just see through our children that they're happier, easier, they're just brighter versions of themselves when they're outside. And I think it's really easy for us, especially as two outdoorsy people, to kind of sit there and say, yeah, get them outside all the time and take them on kayak trips. But we also appreciate it isn't that easy, and that, like you say, there's time and places for screen time and time indoors, and there's time and places where to go outside is the best thing. And that's why we actually wrote Wildlings. It's because it's actually accepting and appreciating it isn't all that easy. Just like everything in parenthood, it's just nice to have a manual, nice to be able to open a book and turn a page when you're a tired parent and say, this is what we do and this is how we do it, let's go. And we thought, well, if we're struggling, especially at the end of lockdown, we're struggling for ideas and things to do with them, then I'm sure everybody else is. And so, I guess it was like our little way of kind of being able to give back a little bit about our ideas.
We have a lot of advantages that we live in a rural environment. We have the river right next to us. We have countryside just over the way. We both had families who encouraged us as children to be outside all the time. I've been working with kids and wildlife and adventure for 20 years. We have a certain repository of experience and knowledge that does make it easier for us. And we were still struggling ourselves. So, there were a lot of friends that we had who live in cities, who might not have gardens, might not have their own outdoor spaces. And for them, the challenge was huge. And during that period of lockdown, because our time outside was rationed to us, it became more precious. And everyone wanted to suck the last morsel out of every second they had outside. And so, we kind of got together. It was Helen's idea originally, but then we got together, wrote a book together without getting divorced, which has to be a positive. And it's been great.
It's a great idea. So come on, tell us what are a few of the key tips then for families that don't often get out into the countryside, but they get the chance and they don't want to mess it up because get it wrong and you put the kids off for quite a long time. So
You're
what should they be thinking
thinking
of?
specifically of sailing here. It's because we constantly talk about when's the right time to put Bellatrix and Fox in a boat where they won't hate Ben. So it's sort of we're trying to work out, aren't we? Kind of what the best thing is to do so that we don't put them off for life.
That's a bit harsh.
Well, in fairness, Bellatrix has actually taken to it quite well recently, hasn't she? She's got quite into it lately.
She has.
But
We don't get out that often. But the point
On
is,
her
if
own
you don't
terms.
get out that often, what should you do? Because you don't want to make a mess of it and ruin the kids' experience.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think it's very important that you don't put too much pressure on it, and that sometimes it is okay just to wander outside without any agenda and just have complete freeform play in the outdoors, and for them not to feel like they are being pushed into doing anything, particularly if it's one of your passions. I can see how that would be an issue for you. It certainly was for us in getting them on the water in canoes and kayaks and paddleboards. The second you start pushing it as your thing is the second you feel very active resistance from them. So quite often it's been like subtle tricks of finding ways that it's their idea and finding ways in which there are extra things they could be achieving. We're off on a pirate quest looking for treasure, that we're off to tag a list of 5 different things that they have to see on this particular canoe trip. And after a while, it starts to become a very natural thing. It's just everybody in the big red canoe and we're off up the river.
We are in a very straight system here, aren't we, in the UK with regards to education? There isn't much room for sort of, either side of that conversation. So I don't know. I just wonder whether, we'll feel as our children grow up, whether they're in the best setup really in terms of an educational system to sort of progress. Oh, the Amazon delivery's arrived on that very serious note about the future of our planet and our children. Hang on a sec. Shall I go and get it? Em's going to get it. Let's carry on while we're figuring out whether the trainers have arrived for school. But do you see what I mean on that subject? I'm waffling around it, but what I mean is that we have a very set educational system in this country. Does it work for everyone? I'm not sure it necessarily does, because you more high performance people you speak to haven't necessarily benefited from that.
Yeah, totally. I think, and for me, I guess, so I came into rowing when I was 21. I didn't meet rowing at all because of the education I went through, because of, I grew up in a small fishing village in Cornwall and went to the local school, ended up going to university and becoming a PE teacher, and nothing would have led me down the path of becoming an Olympian. It was a concept so foreign to me. It was a dream. It was a dream that happened to other people who lived in the bright lights and big cities, and it wasn't going to happen to me. And then London won the bid for the Olympic Games in 2012, and they ran a campaign called Sporting Giants, and I was physically tested and measured and told you could be a good rower. And that is the thing. That is the crossroads in my life that led me to being an Olympian. And yeah, there was nothing in my trajectory until that moment, until I was just lucky enough to be involved in this campaign that was going to get me there. And so many people I met on the team and Olympians I met other ways. You're so right. It didn't get there through these kind of classic formal routes of just normal education.
But
so you've had to be outliers.
I need to ask Helen about this, because Helen, I also grew up in Cornwall, not so far away from you. I was on the Fowl Estuary, and I've thought about this a lot as well. And do you think there was perhaps something about the fact that, don't get me wrong, Cornwall is an amazing place to live and grow up. It's so beautiful. But like you say, it's not London. It's not the rest of the country. There isn't a huge amount going on in Cornwall. So the fact that you had this opportunity to do something really special, you jumped on that perhaps more than you would have done if you'd grown up in and around London and you had so many other opportunities and distractions.
Totally. It was like someone was handing me this golden ticket and I was going, who, me? Like, stuff doesn't happen to people like me. And yeah, you're so right. You grow up in a place with, you don't see it at the time, but it's full of opportunity. It's the most beautiful place. You've got the amazing things around you, but you don't have the infrastructure of the centres of excellence, of the places that people who go on and do great things go to. And that's the thing I try to say whenever I go back home, whenever I go into schools, especially rural schools, is to say, you can sit here and be anything you want and do anything you want. Don't let where you are be a negative. It's the biggest positive but you do have to be maybe more proactive about going out and finding the right people to speak to, the right places to go, because you don't just stumble on them. And when I was younger, I just told myself, people from London London seemed like the centre of the world, and it was people from London are the Olympians and are the athletes and are the actors and are the singers, and that's not me. And I just didn't realise how wrong I was.
But you're both basically outliers, right? You're both basically, you've identified that the system is not going to do it for you, and you're going to have to do it some other way. An opportunity comes along and you grab that opportunity. So is that a mindset thing? Is that because of the people you naturally are, or is that because of your circumstance? I don't know. It's this nature-nurture piece, isn't it?
Yeah, driven, but then you get the opportunity, and the two go together, and you think, I'm driven to find my thing. This might be my thing. I'm going to make it happen.
What on earth are you two going to be like at sports day? Because we're terrible, by the way.
Well,
and I just talk about sport. I don't do it as well as obviously you guys do.
The other mums were telling me that at nursery sports day, I should turn up in my GB tracksuit and get my spikes on. And
we went to a local school.
The sack race to Helen.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I could talk about this.
Yeah, you
I might get into trouble.
No, it's fine. We went. Go on.
Well, so we were looking at a school locally for Bellatrix a couple of years ago, and he said, "Oh well, it's great because sports day, the parents get
you were competitive
really
school,
engaged,
didn't we?
really
Yeah.
engaged." He said, "Well, yes, it was fine until Mo Farah turned up for the for the egg and spoon race." So.
And you're like, she's not going here.
That's not too competitive. Yeah.
I want to win sports day.
But that's an interesting point. So competitive. So that other piece about the competitive nature in sport as opposed to just taking part. I mean, I think I probably know the answer to this, although I'm not totally sure. What side of the fence are you on that? Because these days in schools, it's very much driven into the psychology that taking part is everything. We certainly went to visit this particular school, which Ben's talking about, and then panicked based on the fact that you might end up in a race with Mo Farah. But one of the questions leading to that conversation was, are you all about the taking part, or are you about, teaching the school of hard knocks, which is winning and losing, right? Like where do you sit on that? Where do you guys sit on that?
Do you know what? We didn't actually ask Logan School that question. I don't know why we didn't, because it's really interesting. I think that I sit somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't say, like Logan, who's the older one, he's not particularly competitive. And I think he would do really well from an environment that was more nurturing and less hard win-lose. But then again, he needs to experience it because he's going to go into the real world. And the twins, I would say, they compete all the time, don't they? And they thrive in that win-lose environment. So I think it has to be a mix, because the children are a mix of personalities, aren't they?
No, it's true. And in terms of, so we talked earlier about Steve going away on these mad expeditions and the risk factor, maybe the risk assessment now being obviously greater because there are little ones at home. How do you feel, Helen, when he goes off to do these things where he faces off with a king cobra or a black mamba or whatever it might be? I mean, what's running through your mind when he's off doing these various trips?
Yeah, I normally wish I was along there with him, because it's just like dream trips. They just sound amazing.
She thinks she could do it better than me. is reading between the lines. She's just like, I'd be so much better at that.
No. I think the thing that everyone says, do you worry? And the thing that stops me worrying is that I see the research Steve does, and he will sit there and he will not only learn about the environment and the terrain and the the map of the country. He will learn the language. He'll go to the detail of learning the locals' language, the local dialect, the social structures of the place where he's going. And even if he's going in search for animals, that he's going to interact with the society, that he's going to know what the animal. And I feel like when you see someone being that thorough, they're going to be as safe as they can be. It's not. If I was going to do that, I would probably get on a plane and go, I'll be fine. So I think I would put myself into danger doing that through just lack of preparation, but he's really prepared.
Has it ever gone wrong, Steve? Have you ever not prepared and it's fallen over?
It's gone wrong quite a lot of times, but probably not so much down to lack of preparation as just every single day is different. Every single day things happen which you could never prepare for. That is the joy of the job, and so often gives you the greatest encounters, the greatest experiences, and things that you would never dare to dream could happen. The moments when you walk out of the rainforest to find a waterfall that doesn't occur on any map and doesn't have a name and nobody's recorded ever having seen before. Those moments that you could never plan for are balanced out with the moments where you find yourself paddling into a canyon with a class 5 rapid in it that you weren't expecting. You have to take the rough with the smooth. And yes, there have been some pretty sketchy moments over the years, but then considering how long I've been doing this and that it is day in, day out, actually far fewer than people might expect.
Is there anything you won't do?
I wouldn't do Strictly again.
That's probably the most
That's a good
terrifying of
shout.
all. That's probably the most
so.
terrifying of all experiences, right?
Put them up against a great
I think
white
that
any day,
there's,
but
I reserve the right on any single day, with any single animal or any single challenge, to be able to look at it and say to the team, no matter how much work we've done preparing for it, building up to it, no matter how important it is to the program or to the expedition, to say no. And everybody else on the team has to know that they have that ability too. And that can be with something relatively simple. There have been times when I've been catching a tarantula, which I've done 1,000 times before, and I've looked at the one particular animal and thought, no, that one's going to bite me, and I'm not going to do it this time. And I need to be able to know that I have the support from the team around me to enable that security to happen. And if I have that security, then I can feel free to do things that might seem insane to many other people, because we've ticked all the right boxes. We're working together as a team of people who really know what we're doing. And, with that in mind, there's not something that I definitely would not do.
No, I think the thing that's, if one thing scared me, now we're talking about it, I do think that cave diving is the thing that, because you've got that claustrophobic underground element, and then fill it with water. And I think that I kind of figure you can, or Steve can, paddle or climb or walk his way out of anything, but you can't beat the elements if you're underground in a cave system in the water and something goes wrong. It could be like a torch battery failing, or somebody becoming ill underwater, and that scares me, because I think if it's controllable, I feel like he could do it. But when the elements take over, I find that element, that's probably the most scary environment. If I know he's off, cave diving, that's scary.
That's exactly how I feel about Ben and sailing. It's exactly the same thing. I feel like if you're sailing in an arena setup where you've got to go from one mark to the other, to the other, to the other, and back again, or whatever it is. I know it's more complicated than that, but I'm simplifying it for the purposes of the conversation. But if you actually had to do an offshore race or go and do something like that, where you're having to every day deal with different environmental concerns and issues that might crop up, that's the bit I don't like so much. That's the bit I think, oof, I don't know if I'd be quite as comfortable with that, because I get the same question to me asked as you obviously do. Like, do you worry about any of it? And I don't worry when I know that the preparation's been done, but I worry about things like when you're testing that America's Cup boat for the first time and no one's been on it before, and things like that, just to sort of prove the modelling and things like that. I don't like that bit. I'm okay with the racing bit. Just so we're clear.
Okay, it's good. It's good to know you've been paying attention on what the courses are, bit to bit to bit. But
there to there to there to there. Yeah.
yeah, but no, you're right.
Avoid landing rocks.
Yeah. Avoid other boats as well. Yeah, probably we haven't done a good enough job on either of those fronts recently. But no, you're right. I mean, it's the same, isn't it? Preparation. Steve talked about the preparation. That's absolutely key. And having a really good team around you, good teammates, and everyone knowing what they're supposed to be doing. And if something does go wrong, having the procedures in place to react, that's key. I just want to quickly get your thoughts, both of you, on climate change, because you're both in and around the elements the whole time. You talk about being in the outdoors a great deal. You must have very strong opinions on, what's happening to the state of our planet and what sort of a planet our children are going to inherit. What is your take on that currently?
Crumbs, it's massive. I've made 2 or 3 whole series on climate change. In fact, my first whole series on climate change was in 2005. The first program I made was in the year 2000, and back then the world-class climatologists, meteorologists, glaciologists that I was working with, people with brains the size of a planet, were saying, so the next 10 years are going to be the warmest we've ever had on record. We're going to see a 1.5 degrees increase in temperature. We're going to see this amount of parts per million CO2 increase. The time for talking is over. The time for action is now. We know it's happening. That was in the year 2000. And we're still saying the same things now. And I think that the one real positive that I got out of COP at the end of last year, which I was lucky enough to go to both the blue and the green zones of, and to really, see and feel the energy that now is being driven towards proper solutions, is that there was never any climate science denial. That just didn't happen. Nobody was even mentioning it. It wasn't mentioned on the news. It wasn't mentioned in the media. It was all, okay, finally we're going to engage with this. At least 20 years too late, but there are still real positive things we can do. We just need to get that era of questioning whether it's actually happening behind us. And there's a lot of the media outlets. I think Sky actually was the first one to say, we are going to stop having climate science deniers on our screens. We are not going to feel the need every time we have someone who is talking about the facts and what we do about it, feeling the need to balance that out with someone saying that it isn't even a thing. So yes, I mean, I do feel that finally we're getting a hold of how we engage with it. And at the same time, as we are really seeing and feeling the effects, in real time. This summer has been the first time that you've actually seen meteorologists who are prepared to say, this weather event you're experiencing right now is because of climate change. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they would feel the need to say, in all likelihood, there are mitigating factors from climate change that make it possible that this event is going to become more serious. And you'd have to put all those qualifiers in. And now the scientists aren't doing that. They're saying the reason we have had the hottest summer on record, equals hottest summer on record, is because of climate change, full stop. And we need those hardline objective facts. As an uneducated populace, we need to not be hearing it in science speak. We need to hear it definitively in order to wake up to the reality of it.
No, you're absolutely right. But what do you think about the role of government in all of this? Because any democratically elected government they're struggling, aren't they, to be able to implement the change that's necessary. Yeah, how can we get across that line so that
yes,
they can actually make the changes that they're going to make,
and globally as well.
Get it across the line, on a global scale,
Without question. We have an awful lot of talk about personal responsibility and not enough talk about how this has to be driven forward by big business and it has to be driven forward by politicians and by governments. And moving away from the very big decisions that have to be made at the heart of government in terms of how we generate our electricity, how we use it, and how we make sure that we are taking the most from the companies that pollute the most and that expel the most carbon gases, to make sure that they are making right on their wrongs. And these are all things that have to come from government, and they will come from government when government know that it's important to us, the people that are electing them. So yes, climate change, I'm not saying for a second that climate change has to be the most important thing on the agenda of our government or of us as a populace, but it needs to shift up our list of priorities significantly, because pretty soon it's going to be at the root of all of our problems. Let's
end on a high note, which is what we like to do every time we speak to people in this podcast, guys, is to ask them for a nugget that people can take away into their everyday lives, like a performance tip. So I sort of want to ask both of you, Helen, maybe you first. What can people do every day to perform better? And same to Steve after.
Oh, I would say almost don't take the time you have. So if you've got 10 minutes to do something, do 10 minutes of it and never think it's only 10 minutes, so I won't bother. So take the time you have. It doesn't have to be the person next to you.
Oh, that was
Was
what
that
I was going to
yours?
say.
Whose 10 minutes is it?
That's definitely, I would say, I know. That's the thing that I've learned most from Helen about training and about personal improvement has been exactly that. I very much have the tendency to go, oh, I've only got 10 minutes. What's the point of training? Helen will say, I've got 10 minutes. I can do 10 minutes, which, over the course of the day or the week or the month is going to add up. And it does make a huge, huge difference. My tip would be start the day well. Whatever you do, start the day with a good, healthy breakfast. I would say that having a green smoothie first thing in the morning, full of vegetables, full of all the things that your body needs, forcing that down will make you feel through the rest of the day that you've ticked the diet box relatively well. And it just starting the day with hopefully a little bit of stretching or training, starting the day with a positive statement makes a massive difference to how you continue that day and how you feel through it. And as a morale boost and as a drive to do better in your day, how you start is, to me, huge.
That's great. That's great advice. I'm going to take that and I'm going to say I would have taken down Mo Farah in that kids running race.
If he'd had his green smoothie.
So there you go.
And done a few
We
stretches.
believe in you, Ben.
Helen, I just want to get it officially on record. Paris or not Paris? That's the question.
Not Paris right now. I'm not training right now. I haven't retired. I mean, there's always that little monkey on your shoulder, but
possibly.
No,
Possibly.
I'm not
definitely.
training right now.
Steve's face was like, no, not again. You can't put me through this
Come on,
again.
Steve. You're right. Get right behind it, Steve. Come on.
I just love that you're asking. I love that you're asking.
Well, people
Helen
don't seem
saying,
to ask, and you
"I'm
need a
not
definitive
training
answer, right?
now."
Well, no. Do you know what is so cool is that until the day I had Logan, so I after Rio, every journalist said to me, "Are you going to carry on?" And then I had Logan, and I wasn't ever asked again if I was retiring. It was having a baby was a statement of retirement. I think it's so cool that people are now going, "Are you going to do another one?" So yeah, it shows that times have changed.
Okay, so are you going to or not? I really want the exclusive on this.
No, I have no intention, no contact with British Rowing about going back. I'm not training. So yeah, I'm doing at the moment a beach sprint rowing, which is just a much more fun type of rowing. The whole event is about 2.5 minutes long, so you don't get 7 minutes of pain. So I'm kind of doing more of a fun type of rowing at the moment.
I don't know
Brilliant.
if there is a fun type of rowing, but
No,
okay,
I
we'll
don't
take
think
your word
there
for
is
it.
either.
Guys,
Good on
thank
you.
you so much for speaking to us today, and best of luck with the school term and everything that brings, as well as the next expedition,
Thanks,
Steve.
you too.
Bye. So I don't know about you, but I had a couple of takeaways from that. Firstly, that Cornwall has got a hell of a lot to answer for when it comes to GB Olympic success. And
In a good way.
interestingly, coming from, we've got nothing against Cornwall, but perhaps coming out of Cornwall, having an opportunity and really pouncing on that and making the most of it, something I can certainly relate to. And so, yeah, good on you, Cornwall, pint of tinners and all the rest of it.
You're going to regret that. You're going to visit cornwall.co.uk. I'll be in touch soon.
Oh, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that point. No, I haven't finished yet.
Oh,
Sorry, I haven't finished yet. One
There's
other comment. I mean, holy crap. Steve thinks he can talk down a tarantula. Is it a friendly tarantula or not?
he can read body language, that man. He can do all sorts.
I'd say that scared the crap out of me. So anyway, good on you, Steve.
I think my biggest takeaway from that was the fact that there are these two super high performing people who obviously are brilliant at what they do in their own respective ways and having to make it work together with a young family. And still occasionally they fuck it up, frankly, because that is really good for someone like me to hear.
Are we allowed to swear on this podcast? Are we past the...
We just did, so I guess we can. But I think the thing is that you expect them both to be absolutely perfect, and the reality is different. it is for everybody. You know, there will be chinks in all armours. So I think it's quite refreshing to hear that she's absolutely terrible when it comes to planning.
No, absolutely right. None of us are perfect, but it's about focusing on what counts, right?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, whether you've been watching or listening to today's Performance People. We've been Ben and Georgie Ainsley. And remember, from what we've learnt today, take the time you have. There you go.
Very good.